This whole scene of Jesus making breakfast for the disciples by the sea is it's kind of fun and funny. It's just kind of this silly little beautiful thing where, like, I never imagined that the resurrected Christ would spend his time, like, preparing breakfast, right? You kind of assume that at this point, he's probably not too worried about food at all, right? He's already passed through death back into life. He's got some kind of bodily form, but clearly people don't seem to recognize him immediately, even in this resurrected state. And yet, strangely, as he comes to the disciples the third time, it's not just that he joins them for a meal. He actually prepared the meal for them. This is a sacramental meal. It looks a little bit different than what we're going to do soon because we have bread and juice. They had bread and fish. But this is clearly a sacramental event. As Jesus gathers the disciples around him, again for the third time, he shocks them once again. Even after all that they have been through, after all they've seen, after all they've experienced, Jesus still has the ability to completely stun and surprise them. But of course, the most powerful part of this scene is the kind of redemption of Peter here. As we know, Peter had denied Jesus 3 times, just exactly as Jesus said that he would. And now Jesus seems to give him an opportunity 3 times to reaffirm his love for Jesus. Over and over again, Jesus says, "Do you love me?" Peter again, over and over says, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." Jesus says, "Feed my lambs, tend my sheep," and then finally, "Feed my sheep." And again, I think it's really just as simple as I told the kids. Feed my sheep, tend my lambs, love one another, be kind to each other. It really is amazing that Jesus doesn't seem at all to lord any kind of judgment over Peter or any kind of shame. I wonder if there's pieces of this that we didn't see. Did Peter ever apologize to Jesus? Did Peter ever say, "You know what, Lord, you got me. I really didn't think I was going to deny you, but I sure did. 3 times, exactly like you said"? We don't know. Doesn't seem to be the case, but Jesus nonetheless reaches out. And this is what grace is. Over and over again, Jesus is offering grace, whether or not the person to whom he is offering it has asked for it, or, at least in terms of the way we think, deserves it. That is fundamentally what grace is. The thing that I find so kind of strange about the way we often think about faith these days and kind of spreading the message and doing the work that Jesus has called us to do is we immediately want to take this idea of feeding my sheep exactly as I did, in this kind of metaphorical sense, right? Feed my sheep, be kind to one another, love one another as I have loved you. But it's also fascinating to notice over and over again, Jesus is literally feeding people's bodies. As he is telling Peter to feed his sheep, to tend his lambs, to feed his lambs, he is literally feeding Peter as well as the other disciples. As Jesus was teaching the people how to pray, in the backgrounds of their minds, they remember this experience of Jesus literally providing people their daily bread, 5,000, if not more, people their daily bread. Over and over again, Jesus is not talking about feeding people simply metaphorically. He is calling us to actually feed people. He is calling us to literally feed people. It's why we do things like the blessings box out at the road. It's why we have folks who will be serving at the Kearney Center tonight and every single month that we are able. It's why we do a lot of the things that we do. But we also, I think, can tend to keep that small way of thinking, right? That, well, we'll do our little bits and what we can here and there to kind of feed people, but really it's all about kind of showing love in the world and telling people the good news that Jesus died for their sins. But I wonder, like, what would a foreign policy based around the idea of feeding God's sheep look like? What would it look like if instead of assuming that those people over there, wherever there is, instead of assuming that they are evil and need to be eradicated, what if we recognize that maybe some of them just need to be fed? What if we recognize that a lot of the way we have been in the world has caused people to go hungry? A lot of the ways that we, as Americans, as American Christians, live and move in the world has caused people to literally go hungry. That's an us problem, right? We love to put it on someone else, but as soon as we start to look at our own lives and the decisions that we make daily, we can't ignore the fact that we have so much because other people have so little. We can solve all of these problems. We've got the money for it. It's out there. We've got the resources. We've got enough food. We've got enough money. We've got all of it. What we don't have is the will. We don't have the desire collectively to make these things happen. Again, what would it look like if instead of trying to prove everybody wrong, we tried to make everybody's bellies full? What would it look like if we gave up caring so much about all of those arguments that we have about the silliest things and just committed ourselves to eradicating hunger in the world? What better example of resurrection could we show in the world than to eradicate hunger, right? What better example of God's love can we show than to fill people's bellies for no reason other than the fact that they too are beloved children of God? Think about all of the things that we waste our time and our energy on. Think about all of the people that we discard and assume that they are nothing and they are worthless and they don't matter, when instead we could be out there doing exactly as Jesus called us to, which is to feed his sheep, to tend his lambs in all that we do. Yet, unfortunately, that's not the way we Christians are in the world, at least not wholesale, at least not on a larger scale. Emily and I, before our Easter sermon, we kind of changed things up at the last minute because, there was a mass shooting in the middle of it. And we felt like we needed to be able to kind of respond more directly to that moment. But one of the things that we had planned to kind of get into in that sermon was some of this kind of stuff, this recognition that as a church, we have fundamentally failed to live up to who Christ has called us to be. Now, that's not meant to heap shame upon us because, again, look at Jesus on the beach with Peter. There's no judgment, there's no shame, it's just love and it's just grace. But to recognize that there's this fear out there in the world that the church may be dying, right? That the church as a whole is kind of slowly careening towards death. Our perspective, I'll tell you, was good. Let's let the church die if that's what needs to happen in order for resurrection to happen. Let's let the church, let's let our institutions, let's let our ideas of what is good and holy, let's let all of those things die if it means that Christ can be resurrected in us and in our world to the point that we are willing to go out there and feed God's sheep, to do the work that Christ has called us to do. We took a lot of inspiration from this particular Christian thinker and activist and pastor named Dietrich Bonhoeffer. You may be familiar with Bonhoeffer. He was a part of the Confessing Church movement that was one of the few German Christian movements that was clearly against the Third Reich and the rise of Nazism. In fact, Bonhoeffer, when the war broke out, lived in New York at the time, had this wonderful, cozy teaching position where he could have survived the rest of his life doing nothing but teaching theology in a classroom, but felt compelled, felt called to return to his home country, to live the truth, to embody the truth that this is not who we are called to be. This is not who Christ calls us to be. As a result, he lost his life among many, many countless other people in a Nazi concentration camp. While in that camp, he wrote a series of letters to all sorts of people, but one series in particular to his close friend where he talked about this idea of religionless Christianity. He said, I think we're moving towards this thing called religionless Christianity because look at what religion has got us, right? Look around. We are willing to kill people. We are willing to torture people because of our religion. We are willing to sit back and watch people be shipped down to El Salvador and shoved into these tiny, tiny little cells piled on top of each other as if they were lumber. Look at what religion has got us, Bonhoeffer says. For him, religionless Christianity is not a new kind of church program. It's not an inspiring new evangelism strategy to get the people to fill up our churches and our buildings. It is fundamentally a reorientation of who we are and how we live that arises from our experience and our participation with the risen Christ. It's about unbinding ourselves from all of the trappings of power. It's about embracing the fullness of Christ's invitation to join him on the cross and being a part of the reconciliation of all things as we foster and cultivate the reign of God here and now. In Bonhoeffer's vision of religionless Christianity, he said, "The church is only the church when it exists for others." The church is only the church when it exists for others. Does the church as we know it exist only for others? So maybe a better way to say that is, do all of the people outside of this place, outside of the church, do they see the church existing as for their benefit? Do they see the church existing for them? I mean, it's a laughable idea, isn't it? We know they don't see us that way. We know how they see Christians and the church, and not without reason. We've given them plenty of reason to see us that way. Notice that at the very end of the story, this is the end of the gospel, right? Jesus has been born, he's lived, he's done all the things, he's died, he's resurrected. He's about to ascend into heaven. The last thing he says here to Peter, "Follow me." I thought that's what Peter had been doing the last 3 years. Isn't it strange that even at this point, Jesus continues to offer the invitation, "Follow me." Because the following is never complete. We've never arrived. We've never made it. It is an invitation over and over and over again, each new day. Follow me. Feed my sheep. Follow me. That is the best we can hope for, is just simply to continue to follow Christ, to not assume that we have arrived, not assume that we have made it, not assume that we are a finished product, but to assume that we are always being called beyond ourselves so that we can be the church that exists for the benefit of others. So let us seek to follow Christ. We will come to the table here in just a few moments. It's not bread and fish as he prepared for his disciples on that day, but it is bread and juice that he prepared for us on this day. So as we come, as the sacrament becomes a part of our bodies, and then as we walk down this path that leads us out into the world, may we hear the words of Christ echo in our hearts. Feed my sheep, follow me. To the God of all grace, who calls us to share God's eternal glory and union with Christ, be the power forever. Amen.